This is Land of Havilah, 1 Kings 18. Elijah's been in the kingdom of Sidon for 3 years, hiding out in an upper room in the house of a widow, eating grain and oil that Yahweh's providing in the jars. It hasn't rained all these 3 years, and Elijah has said that it won't rain except according to his word. The drought's getting King Ahab's attention back in Israel, and he's remembering what Elijah said about no rain until he commands it. So naturally he's looking, and Elijah's hiding. He's with the widow in Zarephath of Sidon as we go to verse 1. After many days Yahweh's word came to Elijah in the 3rd year, saying, Go, show yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the earth. Elijah went to show himself to Ahab. The famine was severe in Samaria. Comment: Samaria could mean either the capital city or all the northern kingdom. Here the famine is severe in Samaria, which is all the northern kingdom. Verse 3. Ahab called Obadiah, who was over the household. Now Obadiah feared Yahweh greatly, for when Jezebel cut off Yahweh's prophets, Obadiah took 100 prophets and hid them by 50 in a cave and fed them with bread and water. Comment: This is most likely not the Obadiah that wrote the book Obadiah. This Obadiah is over the household of Ahab. We might say he's Ahab's chief of staff. He's righteous, fearing Yahweh greatly, and hiding 100 prophets of Yahweh in 2 groups of 50 in caves, because obviously the prophets aren't safe in Ahab and Jezebel's Israel. Jezebel has already cut off some of Yahweh's prophets, meaning she killed them, so the rest are hiding. So she's absolutely possessed with hatred of Yahweh. Meanwhile, Obadiah is going to great expense feeding the prophets on a continual basis. He has a very high position, and therefore he has a lot to lose, including his life. His family could be killed. Regardless, he's doing the right thing, so hats off to Obadiah. His fear of the Lord outweighs his fear of anything else. Ahab called for Obadiah in verse 3, now verse 5. Ahab said to Obadiah, Go through the land to all the springs of water and to all the brooks. Perhaps we may find grass and save the horses and mules alive, that we not lose all the animals. Comment: The land's completely brown and barren, even of grass. Remember in verse 1, Yahweh commanded Elijah to show himself to Ahab. Verse 6, So they divided the land between them to pass through it. Ahab went one way by himself, and Obadiah went another way by himself. As Obadiah was on the way, behold, Elijah met him. He recognized him and fell on his face and said, Is it you, my lord Elijah? Comment: Jesus said, quote, He who receives a prophet in the name of a prophet will receive a prophet's reward. Matthew 10:41. Obadiah is receiving Elijah with utmost respect, falling on his face. Verse 8. Elijah answered him, It is I. Go, tell your Lord, behold, Elijah is here. Comment: Now coming up, Obadiah is worried that Elijah will disappear into the woodwork again so that Ahab won't be able to find him. Then Ahab would hold Obadiah responsible for letting Elijah escape. Verse 9. He said, How have I sinned that you would deliver your servant into the hand of Ahab to kill me? As Yahweh your God lives, there is no nation or kingdom where my Lord has not sent to seek you. When they said, He is not here, he took an oath of the kingdom and nation that they didn't find you. Now you say, Go tell your Lord, behold, Elijah is here. It will happen as soon as I leave you that Yahweh's Spirit will carry you I don't know where, and so when I come and tell Ahab and he can't find you, he'll kill me. But I, your servant, have feared Yahweh from my youth. Wasn't it told my Lord what I did when Jezebel killed Yahweh's prophets, how I hid 100 men of Yahweh's prophets with 50 to a cave and fed them with bread and water? Now you say, Go tell your Lord, behold, Elijah is here. He'll kill me. Elijah said, As Yahweh of army lives, before whom I stand, I will surely show myself to him today. Comment: Elijah says, I won't disappear on you. I'll show myself to Ahab today. Elijah says he stands before Yahweh. This brings to mind a private servant whose job it is to stand by his master waiting for instructions. Elijah has been standing for 3 years without further instructions until verse 1, when Yahweh told him to go to Ahab. In verse 15, Elijah called Yahweh, Yahweh of armies, which is traditionally translated Lord of hosts. But Yahweh of armies is much closer to the Hebrew, and better, I think, because it doesn't dilute the meaning of the term so much. We have a God who commands an army of angels, no telling how many, hosts of them. If some of them play harps and look like babies, we can't find that in the Scriptures. But they are known in the Scripture for fighting, and they don't mess around, Joshua 5:14. This is the master before whom Elijah stands. Verse 16, So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, comment, Obadiah told Ahab, I've seen Elijah, and still in verse 16. And Ahab went to meet Elijah. When Ahab saw Elijah, Ahab said to him, Is that you, you troubler of Israel? Elijah answered, I have not troubled Israel, but you and your father's house, in that you have forsaken Yahweh's commandments, and you have followed the Baals. Comment, because Elijah has been standing before Yahweh of armies, he's in a position to speak authoritatively to Ahab. Elijah says, verse 19, Now therefore send and gather to me all Israel to Mount Carmel, and 450 of the prophets of Baal, and 400 of the prophets of the Asherah, who eat at Jezebel's table. Comment, several locations are coming up. Mount Carmel is in Israel overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. It has the seacoast on one side and the valley of Jezreel on the other. In the valley of Jezreel there's the brook Kishon, verse 20. So Ahab sent to all the children of Israel and gathered the prophets together to Mount Carmel. Comment, now the text will immediately fast forward to the gathering of the people of the northern kingdom at Mount Carmel, and Elijah begins by addressing the crowd. Verse 21. Elijah came near to all the people and said, How long will you waver between the two sides? If Yahweh is God, follow him, but if Baal, then follow him. Comment, the wavering between two sides is actually in Hebrew, how long are you going to limp around on two crutches? It gives the picture of shifting the weight back and forth, endlessly from one side to another. Make up your minds, Elijah's saying. Who's God, Baal or Yahweh? Billy Graham used to call for people to make a decision. The magazine of the Billy Graham organization is called Decision Magazine. Long ago, Joshua told the people, Choose you this day whom you will serve, Joshua 24:15. So we should make a decision. How long will we go back and forth? Commit already. But when Elijah called for a commitment, what did the people say? Still in verse 21. The people didn't say a word. Then Elijah said to the people, I, even I only, am left as a prophet of Yahweh. Comment, naturally, after the people said not a word, Elijah knew he was on his own. They're still wavering between Baal and Yahweh, so they're no good for Yahweh at all. There's not another prophet of Yahweh in the crowd, Elijah says, and still in verse 22. But Baal's prophets are 450 men. Comment, Baal's 450 prophets and Asherah's 400 prophets are there because Elijah commanded it to Ahab. As for Yahweh's prophets, they're in caves. But this isn't a rumble between Elijah and Asherah's prophets so much as it is between Elijah and Baal's prophets, because it's Baal who's supposedly in charge of the rain. Elijah says, throwing down the challenge to Baal's prophets, verse 23, Let them therefore give us 2 bulls, and let them choose 1 bull for themselves, and cut it in pieces, and lay it on the wood, and put no fire under, and I will dress the other bull, and lay it on the wood, and put no fire under it. You call on the name of your God, and I will call on Yahweh's name. The God who answers by fire, let him be God. All the people answered, What you say is good. Comment, the people say, Good idea. This ought to be educational, not to mention entertaining. Verse 25. Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, Choose 1 bull for yourselves, and dress it first, for you are many, and call on the name of your God, but put no fire under it. They took the bull which was given them, and they dressed it, and called on the name of Baal from morning even until noon, saying, Baal, hear us! But there was no voice, and nobody answered. They leaped about the altar which was made. At noon Elijah mocked them. Comment, Elijah's having fun now, watching them call on Baal and going into a frenzy, and still in verse 27. Elijah mocked them and said, Cry aloud, for he is God. Either he is deep in thought, or he has gone somewhere, or he's on a journey, or perhaps he sleeps and must be awakened. They cried aloud and cut themselves in their way with knives and lances until blood gushed out on them. When midday was past, they prophesied until the time of evening offering, but there was no voice, no answer, and nobody paid attention. Comment, they started in the morning in verse 26 and went through noon up to the time of the evening offering, which would be at twilight, Exodus 29:41. So literally they called on Baal all day. Elijah's been silent other than mocking them at noon until at twilight, verse 30. Elijah said to all the people, "Come near to me," and all the people came near to him. He repaired Yahweh's altar that had been thrown down. Elijah took 12 stones according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom Yahweh's word came, saying, "Israel shall be your name." Comment, in verse 31, the text is calling attention to the day that Israel got its name when, quote, Yahweh's word came, saying, "Israel shall be your name," end quote. It was night, actually, the night Jacob wrestled with God, Genesis chapter 32. After that all-night wrestling match, when Jacob fought and fought and fought, Yahweh changed his name to Israel, which means wrestles with God. Yahweh set up that wrestling match because he was making a point. He knew that Jacob's descendants would wrestle him perpetually or fight or contend with him. So the text is saying nothing's changed. You're still fighting with Yahweh, and Yahweh named you well. In verse 31, the altar of Yahweh that used to be on the mountain had been thrown down and was in disarray. Since Mount Carmel is a major landmark and quite the high place, it did have an altar to Yahweh, but nobody's keeping it up. Elijah had to put it back together, 12 stones, one for each of the tribes of Israel, which is the way it should be, all 12 tribes arranged in order for Yahweh. Verse 32. With the stones he built an altar in Yahweh's name. He made a trench around the altar, large enough to contain 2 seahs of seed. Comment, the point's that the trench around the altar is large. He didn't put seed in the trench, he just made it big enough to hold that much seed. Verse 33. He put the wood in order and cut the bull in pieces and laid it on the wood. He said, "Fill 4 jars with water and pour it on the burnt offering and on the wood." He said, "Do it a second time," and they did it the second time. He said, "Do it a third time," and they did it the third time. The water ran around the altar, and he also filled the trench with water. At the time of the evening offering, Elijah the prophet came near and said, "Yahweh, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your word. Hear me, Yahweh, hear me, that this people may know that you, Yahweh, are God, and that you have turned their heart back again." Comment, this is all being done to show that Yahweh is God, that Elijah speaks for him, that Elijah has arranged this event at Yahweh's direction, and it's all for the purpose of turning the people back to Yahweh. It ought to turn Ahab and Jezebel around, but it won't. It's evening or dusk, and verse 37. Then Yahweh's fire fell and consumed the burnt offering, the wood, the stones, and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. When all the people saw it, they fell on their faces. They said, "Yahweh, he is God! Yahweh, he is God!" Elijah said to them, "Seize the prophets of Baal. Don't let one of them escape." They seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and killed them there. Comment, for some reason there's no word about seizing the 400 prophets of Asherah, just the 450 prophets of Baal. They carried them away from the mountain to the valley before killing them, maybe because the mountain is holy after what just happened. And this is what Moses said should be done to the prophets of another god. They should be killed, Deuteronomy 18:20. There was nothing left of the altar. God's fire even consumed the stones in verse 38. Now Elijah will speak to Ahab. He said there wouldn't be rain until he said so, and now he'll say so, verse 41. Elijah said to Ahab, "Get up, eat and drink, for there is the sound of abundance of rain." Comment, in Hebrew it says, there is the sound of the roar of the rain. Sometimes it rains so hard you can hear it coming, and Elijah says he hears it, but right now it's only by faith. He has faith that it's coming. He tells Ahab that he should eat and drink before the rain gets here because the rain's going to be disruptive. Verse 42. So Ahab went up to eat and to drink. Comment, now that the big event is over, this is what Elijah did, still in verse 42. Elijah went up to the top of Mount Carmel, and he bowed himself down on the earth and put his face between his knees. Comment, why is Elijah putting his face between his knees? He probably was thanking God for sending fire down on the altar, but according to the New Testament, he also prayed for rain, James 5:17 and 18. Earlier, he prayed that it wouldn't rain, probably the whole 3 years. Then, quote, he prayed again, and the sky poured forth rain, and the earth produced its fruit, end quote, James 5:18. So he's praying for rain. Verse 43, he said to his servant, "Go up now and look toward the sea." He went up and looked and said, "There is nothing." He said, "Go again, 7 times. On the 7th time he said, "Behold, a small cloud like a man's hand is rising out of the sea." Comment, answer to prayer wasn't necessarily automatic even for Elijah. He sent his servant 7 times to look for clouds. We have the concept here of praying into prophecy. There was a prophecy in place that there would be drought, but nevertheless Elijah kept praying that the prophecy would be fulfilled, James 5:17. Then there was a prophecy that it would rain, and Elijah is now praying for that, kneeling with his head between his knees, that the prophecy would be fulfilled, James 5:18. In the New Testament, as an example, we have a prophecy where Jesus says, "I am coming quickly," Revelation 22:20. Then in the next breath, the Apostle John prayed into it, saying, "Amen, come Lord Jesus." So let's be part of making prophecy happen. Now Elijah will instruct his servant furthermore, still in verse 44. He said, "Go up, tell Ahab, get ready and go down so that the rain doesn't stop you." In a little while the sky grew black with clouds and wind, and there was a great rain. Ahab rode and went to Jezreel. Comment, we find out later that Ahab has constructed a palace in the city of Jezreel, 1 Kings 21:1, but his center of operations still seems to be in the city of Samaria, 1 Kings 22:10. So when this verse says Ahab went to Jezreel, he's going to his palace, riding in the rain. Verse 46, Yahweh's hand was on Elijah, and he tucked his cloak into his belt and ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. Comment, Elijah ran about 25 miles as the crow flies. He beat Ahab home, and the chapter ends there. 1 Kings 19 is next at landofhavilah.net, 1 Kings 19. This is the map of 1 Kings 18. Elijah commanded Ahab to gather all Israel at Mount Carmel. Here, they seized the 450 prophets of Baal at Mount Carmel and brought them to the brook Kishon in the valley below and killed them. The brook Kishon's in the valley next to Mount Carmel. Elijah ran from Mount Carmel to the district of Jezreel. This is the city of Jezreel and the city of Samaria nearby. 1 Kings 19 is next.